Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Pete Caliendo, Baseball Outside the Box, the show that loves interview baseball's best coaching minds who love the challenge the status quo. And as I said Monday, we are back. We are back because we've been gone for a while. I'm not going to get into that because I went into Monday's show and told you all about it. We're just excited about being back and can't wait to get a lot of our audience to return in the U.S. and around the world. Before we start the show, let me just thank couple people here, SIS Solutions, IT consultants, my good friends in Japan. Right now, the World Baseball Classic is going on. I know they're there. They're big baseball people. Check them out on caliendosports.com. You'll see our podcast show there, Baseball Outside the Box, and you will see SIS Solutions, IT company. There's a lot of business in the U.S. If you need IT business, check them out. They are awesome. And I've known them for over 25 years. So great friends of mine. Professional. They'll do a great job. And also special thank you to ESPN Honolulu. Sorry that we've been off for a while, but we appreciate having us back on, and we are looking forward to some great shows. Not to mention our guest today. Talk about a great show. About a month and a half ago, I had the great pleasure of meeting him in Rome, Italy. We did an ISG clinic there. We had Al Avila, general manager of the Tigers, Nick Swisher, the New York Yankees outfielder, Mike Pinto, great friend, Southern Illinois Miners coach, and Jim Mansilla, Miami-Dade famous coach in Miami-Dade in the States, and also national team coach for Team Italy at one time. But I didn't tell you who our guest is, but you can read it on the screen. Jeremy Guthrie, let me tell you, Stanford grad. First of all, he went to Brigham Young. He was a first-round pick. I imagine we're going to talk about that in the 2002 MLB draft. What I love about him, multi-sport athlete. We keep talking about multi-sport athletes. He played a lot of sports. Class valedictorian. Now, that's what I'm worried about because, that he's going to make me look bad. He's got probably some big words, right? He's a sociology major. Played a long time in the big leagues, was with, I recognize him with the Kansas City Royals. He's got his Kansas City shirt on because he played in the playoffs, was not on the World Series roster, probably should have been. But let me tell you, after meeting him, outstanding individual, class act, watched him work with players, coaches, great teacher. And I did want to mention his mother is Japanese American from Hawaii. So Jeremy is the fourth generation Japanese American. I want to talk about that a little bit too. So Jeremy, hey, it's been a while. I think I blew you off for a while. I've been wanting to get you on the show, and I just haven't gotten things rolling. But man, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Pete, you are in high demand. You got people banging down your radio broadcasting booth trying to get into your podcast. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Doors down, tracking you down from Peru to Rome to Serbia.
Hey, yeah, and speaking about that, I didn't give you enough of an intro. You also do a lot of mission trips, and you've traveled the world. You've coached in different countries. Go ahead and mention that a little bit, because I'd love to hear a little bit about your mission trips and also some of the countries that you've coached, players and coaches in.
Yeah, well, I appreciated that. The first time I ever left the country, I was 18 years old, and I was playing on a summer baseball team called US Bank up in Edmonds, Washington. And we went over to Skydome, and we played a tournament out there in 1997. And so that was the first time I ever left the country. And it was fascinating to go to Toronto, and still one of my favorite international cities in all the world, and just meet, new people from all over the world, different accents, different languages, different foods. And it kind of gave me that itch, like, wow, I really enjoy being, in other parts of the world and meeting new people. And so fast forward a couple of years, suddenly I'm a missionary for my church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I've been asked to go live in Spain for 24 months. And now I'm walking the streets of, old cobblestone streets of Santiago de Compostela and places like Burgos and León, and spend 2 years there getting to know and serve with incredible people, learning their language to be able to communicate with them, and sharing in the goodness of our faith together. And so really ever since those two experiences, my interest in meeting new people and going to new cultures has been just ever growing. So I've now been to 39 countries, I counted the other day.
Wow.
I think I've either played or taught baseball in 22 different countries around the world, from as far away as Australia, and China, all the way over to Nigeria, and a million places in between, it feels like. So, I think what it combines for me that gives me such joy is, number one, I love um, just understanding more about the world and the way it works. And we see so much more of it now with social media and news clips that give us a better glimpse of all that's happening throughout the world. Whereas in the old days, it might have been a little bit more difficult to learn about a foreign country or what it looks like or what it feels like. We learn so much now, and then to combine that with baseball, which is my other passion in addition to travel, it's really, for me, it's the sweet spot. And I know you have an affinity for that clearly, which is why you have been to probably twice as many countries as maybe I've been to, and taught baseball. But that for me is kind of where this interest in the world and global baseball comes into play.
Yeah, and I think that's why we hit it off too, because we've got a lot in common. I traveled early on, internationally. I was actually, and I'm not trying to top you, but I was 3 years old when I first left, with a
Wow.
flight attendant to Rome. But, we have a lot in common when it comes to that. What's amazing is that here you are. I mean, as I think here, high school baseball, you're playing three sports, you then go to, Brigham Young, then Stanford, then a number one pick, then you're in the minors and the big leagues all these years. And after that, you've done all this, which is incredible. I've done it within a lot more years. You did it in a shorter period. You've gone to a lot of places. Now, one thing I wanted to mention is, and the folks know, I have teams that travel around the country and around the world, actually, and I think it's a great experience. I want you to speak to that, because I get a lot of parents that say to me, well, why should we take an international trip? And I'm not talking about promoting Caliendo Sports International. I can do that. What I mean is, why should a parent at 15 or 14, as a matter of fact, I had this conversation last night with a mom. Why should a 14-year-old go overseas and experience a international trip, whether it be a mission trip, a baseball trip, a cultural trip, a mixture of all? You mentioned some of the benefits, but maybe you can kind of add on to that.
Yeah, that mom or that dad is obviously asking probably for different reasons depending on their child and their circumstances. When it comes to the baseball side of things, if I were to be, from my experience, there is probably no added benefit baseball related wise to going and playing baseball at a young age in a tournament in another country. The talent here in the United States is as deep and rich as you'll find anywhere. There's obviously the Latin American, South American countries, and Asia as well, where they play a super high level at a very young age, and in other countries that are continuing to grow. But when it comes to just building your young man or your young woman as a person, that's what it's all about. It's about exposure and learning that life doesn't revolve around them individually, number one, which I think is a big task for parents in and of themselves. We're in a very self-promoting type of world, and a lot of great things can happen today at a younger age than what we've ever seen before. But additionally, like, the USA is one of the most amazing countries, and I'm grateful to be an American and have all the freedoms and the blessings we have. So to appreciate that more, visiting other countries, seeing other people, meeting people, gives you a much wider horizon and understanding of the world, a deeper respect for what's going on, and maybe even a greater appreciation for what that young man or young woman enjoys in their own personal life. So I think baseball wise, it'll provide you a unique experience and can lead to a lot. I know so many young players who, having played or gone somewhere around the world, that has led to something very unique in baseball terms. Maybe they've gone and played baseball there later on in their lives. Maybe they've made a friend with someone in another country and helped them come to the United States. So there's a lot to be said for that. But I think above all, the experience for your young man or young woman that's going to go overseas and play ball, consider the growth and what it will do for them as a person and expanding their horizons. And that's what I would say to a parent that is uncertain or maybe unsure as to what would be the reason or the benefit for that. Because it's a big sacrifice. Clearly, you don't get to travel across the ocean for free. It requires money, time, and sacrifice. So I do think it's very, very worth it. And it will make your child that much more well-rounded, which can lead to any number of outcomes that would be really, pleasing to a parent.
Absolutely. Well said, man. And a lot of times I'll tell parents also, I mean, if you don't have the money, last thing I want them to do is put it on their credit card and get in debt. They can raise the money, they can do it later. It is an awesome experience. And I think you put that in great words. Folks on Facebook, thanks for joining us, man. We got a lot of people on Facebook. Hey, Jeremy Guthrie, former major league pitcher, tremendous amount of experience, not just a pitcher, but a fantastic coach too. So if you got any questions as we're talking here, we're going to get into some of the baseball stuff, the mental part, the pitching aspect and all that. So if you got questions, type them in the comments section on Facebook and we will get those questions answered. Hey, everything starts with our parents, Jeremy. And I want to talk about your mom because I don't know your mom, but I kind of want to get to know her. Japanese American from Hawaii. Was that correct?
Yeah. Born and raised in Hawaii. And
how about her influence with the being Japanese, traditionally, with her parent, maybe things she learned from her parents that she brought on to you. How was it growing up? Because I love Japanese baseball and I love Japanese people and I love the country. I think it's one of the greatest countries around. So maybe talk about a little bit about that.
Yeah, I agree. I'll tell you a funny story. My wife and I have been married for 21 years. And back in 2014, following the World Series in 14, I was invited to go play for a Major League Baseball postseason all-star team, they called it. And so we went over to Japan and we played the samurai team, and a lot of fun details with that trip in and of itself.
Oh, yeah.
You go back to 2014, we ran into what I believe was a 19 or a 20-year-old Shohei Ohtani, who hit 100 miles per hour on the gun. He didn't hit any home runs against us during the series. I think it was 5 games. But we knew who Shohei Ohtani was. He was a big deal. Kenta Maeda before he came over, Tanaka before he came over. These were guys that were on that Samurai All-Star team. And so they took it to us. They beat us, I believe, 4 out of 5 games. And they swung the bat well, and certainly they pitched and played great defense. But on that trip, my wife, at the end of it, she kind of looks at me and smiles and she goes, "Having been to Japan, I now know why you do a lot of the things you do and the way you are in so many different ways."
There you go. We got to hear about these.
Yeah, and just never having been there, just the attention to detail. My mom was obviously very organized, very on top of things, from her own kind of personal organization. But even as kids, she would help us try to be attentive to the things that needed to be done. And I think I learned that from her, and just inherently, my wife believes, she's like, after seeing it, you've never been to Japan, but you are Japanese in so many ways. And so, they're kind of, their demeanor, the way they go about different things, with a serious nature, perhaps. I enjoy fun, but I'm also can be serious and really focused on what I'm doing. So those are some things that stood out to her. And so that trip was amazing. And my mom, was raised in Hawaii. So by all accounts, she's an American of Japanese descent, but certainly the influence of her mom and her dad, who were also raised in Hawaii, and her grandparents, who she had a little bit of time with, were the ones that came over from Japan. All of that influences you both in direct and unconscious ways. And so I'm grateful for my heritage. I'm grateful for my mother, who is an amazing mom and still very active and engaged in me and my 3 siblings' lives and all of her grandchildren. She's one of those angels that anytime someone talks about my mom, they light up and they get very excited to tell me a story about how she did something for them or how she's just always around to help. And that's really who she is.
How about, her way to, I don't know, cook your food, make food the way, your nutritional aspect, or, the exercise. A lot of Japanese are always stretching or doing something, walking. Is that a custom that she had? And by the way, we're on ES.
I'm getting a phone call and it says spam risk. So you talk about my mom's cooking. I could classify my mom's cooking as very kind of Hawaiian, American, Japanese influenced. But one of my favorite things to eat is spam. And so I'm getting a spam risk call right now, and you're talking about my mom's cooking. I think I was at risk of eating spam too much. Spam, I don't even know what's in spam. If you haven't had spam, you need to go try it. I recommend cooking it to a little bit of a crisp. I love it crispy. But, we'd have spam musubi. Anyone who's from Hawaii or been to Hawaii knows what a musubi is. Spam musubi, a lot of tempura. Tempura is probably my favorite thing that she would make. And she would deep fry tempura, the vegetables, certainly shrimp. In this day and age, I've been all over the world. Just came back from Thailand and Vietnam, and I saw tempura everything over there, from fish to meat to vegetables. So she brought a lot of that influence into the kitchen, and we had rice almost every meal. And so even getting married, my wife was accustomed to eating potatoes, and we adjusted to eating a lot more rice. So small things like that.
And what's great about all this is that we are on ESPN Honolulu also. So, a lot of people in Honolulu will be listening to this, and we try to get guests. We try to get guests, in Hawaii, a lot of great baseball people come from Hawaii. They got a great development program there, and we've had some on the show, which is nice. And as we talk about the international part, one of the things I realized when I met you and when you wrote me some emails was the passion you have for, like you mentioned earlier, traveling the world, but also working with coaches and players in the game of baseball, along with the missionary, but kind of mixing it in. Talk about your experiences in some of these countries, meeting the coaches, meeting the players, maybe some of the things that you even, because a lot of times, in mission trips, we think we're always going to teach somebody something, but yet we learn from them. Same thing in baseball, right? We go there, we think, oh, we're going to teach the coaches this and teach the players this. And of course we are. We're going to give our best, opinions and workouts that we can to help them all out. But at the same time, we're learning a lot from them.
Oh yeah. It's, I'm glad you bring that up. What I think most impresses me and others who accept the opportunities and or create them themselves to go around the world and participate in baseball, I'll call it that, because whether you're teaching or playing it, you're participating in it, is you realize this game is very global. Baseball is much more global than I think the average fan, even listening right now, would ever know. It's been played for 50, 60, 70 years in a lot of different countries, and there's professional leagues all over the place. I remember at one point, I thought about a goal of trying to play in every professional league, and I went through and started researching it. And there was like 35 leagues around the world. And I'm like, wow, that would actually be really tough to play in all these leagues. And I certainly didn't accomplish that goal. But baseball is important to a lot of different athletes and a lot of different federations throughout the world. And I think that number one is what impresses me. And then on top of that, and more, close to the topic here, is the coaching. There are coaches that are passionate and knowledgeable and very invested into the game of baseball. And some of them teach people in the smallest little pueblos or little villages you could ever imagine. And the stories are all different and unique. And I actually hope to find and share more of these stories down the road. But you'll find a guy that maybe his father met an American 70 years ago and they taught him baseball. And this older gentleman himself in this day and age is still teaching baseball. Maybe they built a baseball field or a facility to try to teach the game. You have that kind of passion all over the place, and you could speak to that probably even better than I could. But there are very knowledgeable coaches. YouTube has opened up a great opportunity for many of these coaches to go and research. So those that don't get the chance to have a visit from a Pete Caliendo or and the many others that are invested in this, and it's a large community of former players and coaches that love to spread the game globally. But you have these local international coaches that they can learn a lot of different ways, and they soak it all in. And to your point, because they've experienced baseball in a unique way, we can be learners as well. And we always need to be learners. You should never stop learning. I think the greatest, the most successful athletes and individuals would always share that. To be great at life and great at whatever you do, you're always learning. And so I think above all, I just learn respect and passion for the game when I go to all these different locations. But additionally, you'll see a drill or you'll maybe see a guy doing something like, you know what, that actually has a lot of reason or foundation. That's the way I learned. I didn't receive a lot of instruction as a young man growing up in Southern Oregon. I grew up in Ashland. I had great coaches that loved the game and they taught great things, but either I wasn't listening or maybe I wasn't, as invested in it, but I really learned by watching. And so when you watch and you really just think things through, Like I remember trying to develop arm strength. I thought to myself, well, how do you throw far and hard? You just kind of watched guys, and then you felt your body. And so some of the best athletes are ones that are able to watch great ones or coaches, but they're also, almost all of them are self-coached in many ways, where they can feel their body, they can sense it, and they can start to put together the puzzle pieces to build from the foundation up and develop these things. So I think that watching international coaches and players do things, I think in a lot of ways, many of them were self-taught in really positive ways also, where they just thought things through and said, well, to do this and this and this effectively, this would make sense. The body feels like it's in a good position here. And that's one thing I think I've learned through the international travel.
And we're so lucky, you and I, because of all the countries we've been to and all the coaches we've met. And you said a key word, passion. All these people have passion for the game. A lot of them don't get paid. You know, they're doing it because they love the game. They just love baseball. They love working with young kids. They're very creative, right? I mean, they have to be creative in some ways. So I think that's awesome. And, you know, the other part was you mentioned, you know, being able to watch. I remember my best sport was actually racquetball. It wasn't even baseball. I was terrible at it. But I was, you know, I used to go watch professionals play. And then at the same time, after watching them in a match, I'd go practice the next day, and I'd almost be doing some of the things, not as well, obviously, but I'd be doing some of those things just because I was attentive and watching how they did it, you know, and that really helped me a great deal. You know, you've done a lot in the game. Another thing you've done, and it's a great tie-in to what's going on now. Last night, the World Baseball Classic started. Great event. Started last night, 11 p.m. in Taichung, you know, someplace I've been, where the Netherlands beat Cuba this morning. You know, the Taipei got trounced, unfortunately, by Panama. Was game 2, and that's continuing on. Obviously, it's going to go on until I believe the 28th of March. You know, Team USA's in that, and you played for Team USA with the WBC. Definitely want to hear your experience there. First of all, because you were playing, you had to make a decision. You know, am I going to do the WBSC or am I in spring training? I mean, I'm sure there were many decisions you had to make. Talk about that process, how it worked.
Yeah. So I was a starting pitcher in the 2009 World Baseball Classic. I was on the team with Jake Peavy, Ted Lilly, and Roy Oswalt, 3 fantastic pitchers and fun, really amazing guys. Really, that for me was a highlight. When people ask about what were my highlights during my career, playing for Team USA in the World Baseball Classic is right up there. We had Hall of Famers Derek Jeter, Chipper Jones, and the invitation came to me really as a surprise. I had just completed my second full season in 2008. And so, you know, still trying to learn the game. I had some moderate success as a rookie and as a second-year player with the Baltimore Orioles, but certainly wasn't an all-star and never was an all-star, but received a phone call. I think it was around January of 2009. And they said, hey, we've watched you pitch in the American League East and hold your own against the Yankees and the Red Sox. We'd love to invite you to pitch for Team USA. And so I reached out to the Orioles and said, I've had this opportunity. I'd really like to accept it. And they were obliged to allow me to do that. And for me, it really wasn't much of a question. To be able to be on Team USA was a huge honor. And so I wanted to do it. And you know, it was different. You'll hear a lot of people talking about preparation and disruption in preparing for the most important part of the year, which is, you know, your championship season with your particular organization. And so it does present a little bit of challenge there. You're asked to ramp up a whole lot quicker, and those pitches and games suddenly mean a lot more than maybe a spring training outing might mean to a pitcher. But I think overall the experience was fantastic. You have to really kind of step back and you have to prepare sooner. And so most of these pitchers, from what I can tell, are more aware ahead of time whether or not they're going to be in the WBC, especially the international players, because those federations and, you know, organizations are a lot more on top of who's going to be playing because maybe there's better communication or just more of a knowledge there, a history. The Team USA has so many people to pick from that, you know, you're never quite sure who's going to be willing, who's going to be available to come. But there's really no better tournament. I think it's an incredible event. If you haven't watched it, watch it. If you haven't been to a game, go to a game and just feel what baseball feels like in other countries. Like if you go to the game, USA, Mexico, I know it's already sold out for there in Phoenix, but
Yep.
similar to Japan, you're going to feel different as a fan. The singing, the chanting that goes on just brings baseball to life. And so it's incredible to see that. And you can kind of feel it through the broadcasts. But, Japan is electric to play in front of the Japanese fans. And that's something that I can appreciate as a US born player.
Folks, just as a reminder, if you're on Facebook, you want to ask Jeremy a question about what we're talking about or anything else, just type it in the comments section. Be glad to ask them. Jeremy, what was it like? I mean, in the Classic, scouting reports, I mean, you might have some, but you're pitching against teams you don't know, some players you don't know. I mean, it's not every player on the roster is not a major league player from the U.S. How do you deal with that? How did the preparation happen when you had to go in to pitch to certain hitters?
I would compare it to minor league or college preparation. The scouts, the coaches had done as much homework as they could. When it came to a major league player, obviously that's self-explanatory. You had all kinds of video and history there with the players. But when it came to someone they'd never seen, they provided video. There was an opportunity to watch a little bit and see them from either the previous World Baseball Classic or maybe minor league video. But the Team USA is fantastically prepared that way. And so the coaches get together and they write up a scouting report. And it may not be as detailed as you would receive during the season, but they have information and they know and give you a general idea. And so, what it comes down to, ultimately, I think for every player, pitcher and or hitter, it comes down to executing to your strengths and doing what you can do. And so, no matter what about a certain player, you want to know if they're fast, if they steal bases, if they're looking to shoot the ball the opposite way, or if they're looking to get big and pull the ball for damage. Those things help. But still, at the end of the day, a pitcher is going to make his best pitches, and he's going to execute the game plan the way that allows him to be the most successful. And so you take the information, you balance it with what you do well and what you are working on, and then you go out and attack. And so I felt very prepared in all the games I pitched in, and I think everyone did. And so Major League Baseball and the individual teams do a nice job of helping players feel prepared and have a scouting report.
I know it's 209, and you may remember it, may not, no problem. Was there a player, an unknown player from a country that you saw and you said, wow, this guy can really play?
Good question. We played against Venezuela, which was, loaded with major league talent. We played them, I think we played them 3 times in the first 2 rounds. Puerto Rico was another opponent. They had all their guys. And then I think we played Canada. So we played Japan. We actually lost to Japan in the semifinals in Los Angeles. The 4-team final, we lost in the first game to them. And maybe the sneaky one at the time, well, not sneaky, but Yu Darvish. We had seen him play and saw him out in the outfield, and what a specimen he is. I think for me, he's one of my favorite pitchers, that I've ever played with, because I spent a little bit of time with him in spring training, but that I've ever watched. I just think he mechanically and the way he executes is as impressive as really anybody across the league. So watching him, maybe that's one that stood out. Clearly, he was well known. It wasn't like he was some kind of hidden gem, a needle in the haystack. People knew who he was, but he put his stamp on that tournament as much as anyone. Daisuke was kind of their headliner, having come off 2 great years with the Red Sox, but Darvish was pretty impressive. Maybe that's the one that stands out.
And Darvish, speaking about Darvish, I wanted to bring it up. He's got like 1,000 pitches, and you never know what he's throwing. All right. I mean, it's amazing how many pitches he has that he can actually control. That takes a lot of work, doesn't it?
Well, you know what he has? He has, in my opinion, as close to perfect mechanics as you might have. Just the way his arm loads, he gets into that strong position so early. He's so linear to the plate. His shoulders, are square to the plate as he rotates, and he's down through the ball. And so when you have that kind of balance and that kind of consistency with your delivery, you can start to alter things. You can start to move your hand and your fingers around the baseball and toy with different pitches. The problem that I go through, and maybe others, is that when you try to throw a different pitch, really what makes a pitch different should just be your hand, where it's out of the ball, the grip, and the location, and how you release it. Everything else should stay the same, but that's easier said than done. I try to throw a changeup. All of a sudden my head pulls off to the side because I'm trying to get inside the ball because I want it to be nasty. And so his ability to repeat his delivery and have it be so tight and so fine-tuned would be one reason I would estimate would be why he's able to come up with so many different pitches, because he can just, let me try this or that or the other, and know that it's not going to affect the way he executes the core pitches of a fastball and the split and the other pitches he throws. So maybe that's a theory behind that, but he does have a very broad toolbox of pitches.
You know what? I am so thrilled that you brought that up, and I'll tell you why. Because as simple in some ways that it sounds, the main message there, if I gather it correctly, and I think it's a message that needs to be sent to all coaches, all players, especially at the very young levels. And I'm going back at the 11, 12s and all that. And that is perfect your throwing mechanics, your pitching mechanics. If you perfect those really well, then the pitches become a lot easier. But you know how it is nowadays. We want things quick. So we want 3 pitches before we can even throw strikes yet.
Yeah. We're worried about number of pitches. We're clearly worried about velocity. How can I get the most velocity out of my body and just maximizing it? And maybe that creates the most out of whack athlete you could ever imagine. But, a lot of focuses are ahead of it, and you can do them all together. You really can do them all together. But a consistent, repeatable delivery should prevent, number one, or it should promote consistency and progress. And hopefully if those mechanics are, sound in the different components of it, hopefully they can also keep you on the field and healthy, which is another thing I know you want to talk about at some point. Is
well, you led right into it. You led right into it, and I'll tell you why. Because one thing people do not know about you, I didn't know till I met you in Rome and got a chance to hang out with you, is that if I could say it correctly, you've never had any major injuries, which is incredible. All the times you've played at the highest levels.
Yeah, I don't know how many innings I threw, but a lot of innings. A ton of pitches, probably more pitches than I should have compared to in relation to my innings. But, I went on the DL once. I was placed on the DL twice. In 2008, I had a shoulder impingement at the end of the year, and the team put me on the DL as I missed 2 starts in September, which was kind of a strange move at the time. And then secondly, I had a bicycle accident in 2012 while pitching for the Rockies and had a sprained AC joint. And so I went on the DL for that. And aside from that,
we're not counting that. That's not a baseball injury.
But I think overall, baseball related injuries, I missed 5 or 6 starts in almost 10 full seasons. And so I'm really pleased at that. I think there's a lot of components to it, and I'll try to share as many as I can. But what was my greatest ability? Probably, as you hear it said many times, my availability was probably my greatest asset. I wasn't a big strikeout guy. I wasn't going to throw you a no-hitter or even a shutout, really, for that matter, for quite some time. I finally threw a couple of shutouts late in my career. But I was available, and I was going to give you a good, solid effort each time, and hopefully that equated to 5 to 8 innings worth of quality baseball. But you gotta stay consistent in your approach. That was one thing I did. I had a very simple routine when it came to running and lifting weights, but I was really, really diligent with it. As simple as it was, as simple and basic as my lifting was, from a squat to a dumbbell bench to some lat pull downs, a tricep exercise, a lot of core exercises, and some lunges. I didn't do a whole bunch. I wasn't doing crazy, unique lifts during my career, but I was really consistent with maintaining during the season and building a little bit in the off season with my weights. I was diligent with my shoulder program. I was big on 3 to 5 pound dumbbell weights, both after throwing, certainly off of a mound, but even in the off season, doing it 3 times a week just to try to build the smaller muscle tissues and have them ready and strong for a 200 inning season, hopefully. And then like we started into it mechanically, trying to get your arm into a good position where there wasn't extra stress added to your elbow or shoulder. And you do all these things. And then at the end of the day, you are at the mercy of your body, because this is a operating mechanism, if you will, this body that we have, and some bodies just break down. I was really fortunate to, my wife says to be built Guthrie strong. My dad has a nice, short, stocky build, and looks indestructible in many ways. And so, I had good genes on top of the preparation, the mechanics, and the work ethic to support that. And I'm really happy. I love to play baseball. I love to watch it as well, but to watch it in a uniform is not nearly as enjoyable as playing it. And so I think when I look back on my career and I compare it, not like I'm comparing it, but I hear other people talk about their careers, almost inevitably, certainly if you're a pitcher, but even position players, they'll talk about big chunks of time during their 10 or 15 years of their career, or 5 years, that were spent rehabbing and not even playing the game that they loved and enjoyed so much. And so, my 10 years were really full. Like, I was playing every 5 days for the most part, and always preparing and always trying to get better. And I appreciate that. The fact that I can look back and say, my 15-year professional career, 10-year big league career, like, I got to get after it almost every single day to try to get better during that time. And that's fulfilling to me.
Yeah, and I love to hear you say that, and that's why I love the show, is because a lot of things you mentioned, mechanics, work ethics, the lifting you did was consistent. You did it in season also. I mean, you may not have done it as much in season, but you were consistent with it. And we know that the body's not perfect. Anybody can get hurt anytime, but at least you did your best, and I believe the consistency part is the key here. You did your best to maintain that, and it allowed you to play longer. And I just want to make sure that, that with our younger kids, that our coaches understand that the mechanics are so important. And the other aspect of this, I was reading, you were a multi-sport athlete when you were younger. How did that help you when it came to playing baseball and then getting to the highest level?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. Whenever I talk to young athletes, and maybe more importantly, coaches and parents, because it seems to be that maybe the coaches and parents sometimes are the biggest impediment to this. But there's a number of big time athletes. J.J. Watt is one that comes to my mind. I don't know him personally, but I've seen him send out multiple messages about the importance of being a multi-sport athlete. If I could spend a couple minutes talking about that, for the listeners and for the athletes that are going to hear this at any point in time, people always ask, how did you throw so hard? How did you, stay healthy? Those are common questions I get, because in my prime, I could run a baseball up, between 92 to 97 miles per hour, and occasionally touch an even higher number from time to time. And I started to think about that one time. I said, how did I throw hard? I think about some of my most important formative years while I was in high school. I was in a town that did not have a summer baseball program. So following my 15-year-old summer where I played Babe Ruth, I no longer had a summer baseball team that I played on. On top of that, I was on a high school team that had upperclassmen that were better pitchers than me and were given the majority of the innings on varsity. And so I was on varsity as a sophomore, but I played the majority of the time in the field, third base, a little bit in the outfield here and there, and I rarely pitched. And so in reality, if you looked from the time I was a sophomore and a junior, if you took those 2 years, which, by all accounts in this day and age, 16, 17, I'm assuming those are probably the two most involved, busy, and active years for, potential professional or college baseball players in this day and age. I pitched a total of like 50 innings, maybe 30. It might have been as few as 30. And so when I came out in my senior year and was hitting 97, 98 miles per hour, someone would say, how do you throw so hard? Well, how did I throw hard? It had nothing to do with baseball. I played football and I was a quarterback, and I trained as a football player. I did cleans. I did, lifting that I wouldn't recommend for a baseball player. But at that time, when you're young, if you have the proper mechanics, I was developing a lot of explosiveness, a lot of strength. And then I would go out and use that with a football, which is by all accounts a much safer throwing sport. Not too many guys in football are getting Tommy John. It does happen from time to time, but you're not seeing guys blow out their shoulders as quarterbacks very often. And so the majority of my youth was done throwing a football from age 15 on, and yet I could throw a baseball 97. Where did I learn that? Well, I learned my body. I learned body strength. I gained explosiveness playing basketball. I gained explosiveness in the weight room, and skills and strength that came from playing football, naturally throwing for one, but other things as well. And so when people say, how did you become a good baseball player? How did you throw hard? I tell them part of it was hard work, part of it was genetics, and a big part of it was actually playing other sports. If you want to be good at one particular sport, I'm certain and very confident that playing other sports will help you improve in the one that you may love the most and prioritize, because you just learn different things. The way your body moves in basketball defensively is going to help you as an infielder. It's going to even help you as a pitcher. The way you develop your hip muscles and change of direction, the explosion to shoot a layup or go up for a rebound. Football, clearly there's movements and strength that is built by doing these sports. And these are the ones I played. You know, you want to talk about wrestling, tennis, track and field. All of these make you a more well-rounded, a more able athlete. And that's just the physical side. Take now the mental side of it and the emotional side of it. You know, I don't love to say it this way, but baseball is one of the more selfish sports. I think it can be very selfish. You know, you can pitch and pitch great and the team can lose. And deep down inside, you might feel like you did your part and feel pretty good about what you did, whereas the team feels down because they lost. You know, you might hit four hits, 2 home runs, and the team loses, but you're feeling pretty good about yourself. Or you might win and you went 0 for 5 and you're kicking stuff in the dugout and you're frustrated. It's almost a selfish sport by nature. Whereas, you know, a sport like football, I love football, basketball, these other sports. You know, you win and lose as a team. Volleyball, if the linemen don't block and the defense doesn't, you know, penetrate the gaps and get to the quarterback and all these different aspects of the game, you don't win. And it's not fun to play football and get beat up and not win. And so I think playing other sports also just makes you a better teammate. It makes you a better, more well-rounded person and athlete, in addition to all the physical benefits. So that is my soapbox. I'll step to the side of it in case you want to jump on for a minute. But
no, man,
I should better at baseball, play other sports in addition. And then on top of that, maybe it goes back to the health, is imagine the amount of rest. You need rest. And so it goes without saying that me not playing year-round baseball certainly is a major component of playing 15 years professionally. When I got older, bigger, and stronger and more developed, my body had not been overtaxed as a 15-year-old or as a 16-year-old. And so I think I was more prepared to be on the field and healthy as an adult.
You know what? I'm telling you, this message needs to be clipped, needs to be sent all over social media, because that was a great message. And my concern is, because look at our young kids, you know, they're being asked to play travel baseball from 8 years old, you know, playing 60, 70 games, sometimes even more, traveling to different states. And then they're training all year round for the game. Now, there are some good coaches out there that tell kids, hey, take a couple months off, go do something fun, go do something different or whatever, you know, and like you said, recover a little bit. But the message was outstanding. And I want to get into the mental part. But before I do, because I think the mental part is so important, the decision here on making sure that you're a multi-sport athlete, you're having fun at what you're doing. I think that's important for young kids. But also, what about parents, their role in helping their kids out? How can a parent, and you're a parent, how can a parent, you know, help a young person when it comes to the development of a sport? Because they're going to be involved one way or another, right? Whether the coach likes it or not. So to me, it's educating the parents and exactly what you just said. Give some advice to the parents. What should they be doing to kind of help their kids out? Maybe not doing at times.
Yeah, well, you know what? If my 16-year-old or my 12-year-old listen to this, they'll probably be shaking their head like, you don't do that. So Take what I say with a grain of salt and know that I'm just like every parent listening, that I'm failing myself. So I think from a high level, what can a parent do? I think a parent should encourage a player to play a lot of different sports and to be active. It's all about being active. It's about being healthy, active, and developing a love and a passion for something. My 12-year-old doesn't love basketball, but we're trying to help him play it, and we pushed him to play it this year, and I think it was a good push in this particular circumstance. The alternative was that he would sit at home and maybe hang out with some friends a little bit longer, maybe do some video games, this, that, or the other. And so, from that perspective, we wanted this to go out there, but I think it will help him. He's gotten better as a basketball player. He doesn't care about it a ton, but he loves being with other kids. So socially, he's in a much better spot for having played. And I think athletically, it's only going to help him. Speed is not his greatest asset, but he has to run a ton in basketball. So it's going to help. So from a higher level, I think what a parent can do is, first of all, encourage it. I think maybe more importantly, what a parent can do, and this is the hardest one, perhaps, is a parent needs to have a real, what's the word? Humble perspective, or a realistic perspective. I think maybe one of the greatest damages a parent might do, and sometimes it matches with the intensity of the kid and it matches with the desire of a kid. But if a parent's trying to push their young athlete to do things because they want them to be a professional athlete and want them to, be an all-star or a Hall of Famer, that's a really tough lot. That's a tough amount of pressure, number one, from a parent. And in reality, it's not healthy. It's not good, because the fraction of players that become all-stars in a professional sport, who knows what the number is? It's probably like 0.5%, right, of the number of kids that play baseball ever become an all-star, or even worse than that, or the NFL, NBA. And so when a parent starts to prioritize a professional career or success in athletics above school and above being well-rounded and a good socially aware and a contributor to the community, I think that can really damage the balance in that young person's life. And so from a large person, I think a parent needs to say, wow, okay, we'd love for you to enjoy sports, and if it leads to a scholarship or a career, fantastic. Give your best, work hard at it, but let's not operate as a family thinking you're going to be in the big leagues, or you're going to be in the NBA, or you're going to be number one on the tennis circuit in the next 10 years, and we're going all in on it. I think that's a lot of pressure, and it leads to a ton of burnout, and you can get burned out anyway, but certainly that's going to be more likely. So I'd say that from a larger thing. And then overall, the part that I maybe struggle more with is, encouraging and trying to foster, and this is maybe the thing I'm thinking about the most, is how do I foster a environment at home that encourages hard work and practice without feeling like it's being forced upon your young athlete. And so, you come at it from different angles. Sometimes a parent might have an athlete that is too serious and too dedicated to themselves, and all they want to do is play sports. Or in other circumstances, you have one that likes the sport, but they're not working really hard at it, and they're not really applying themselves as hard. And so the parents like trying to tell them, apply, do, change. And so I think the idea is just, how do you foster an environment where it's fun and there's learning opportunity, whether that means like, hey, you want to go shoot at the gym, and you think of a fun game that your son likes playing, versus, like, this is me speaking, telling my son to go to the gym and work on a few drills that I know will help him improve on some things that need to be improved on. I'm trying to tell him to go do it. And I think of a way that if I did it with him, he would actually have fun. And so I try to find those. It's not as easy as just telling him to go do something, but those are some feedbacks. I don't know if they make any sense, but some thoughts I have as a parent and what parents might do or not do.
Absolutely. And Jeremy, I remember when I was young, all kids are like this. When they're young, they want to play baseball because they love it, right? They love the sport. Then all of a sudden it becomes not, you still have that love, but then it becomes, I don't know if I'm using the right word, a job, but it becomes a profession, right? You had to go through that. You started as a young kid, loved the game, you played multiple sports. All of a sudden, at a certain time in your life, you realized, you know what, this might be a career. Talk about that change and how you kept it still fun and still like being a kid, because now it became a profession in a lot of ways. That you were a number one pick. I mean, there had to be a lot of pressure under all this. I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, going back to parents, and you've asked about parents a couple of different times. I think something I probably didn't recognize or appreciate as much what when it was happening was there was zero pressure from my parents. And like I just said, there's a balance in an equation that has to work here. They didn't pressure me at all. Is that why I became a professional baseball player? Not necessarily, because they didn't pressure me, but I pressured myself, and so I worked hard on my own. And sometimes you have a mix where the parent wants to work hard and the kid, or you have the one where the kid wants to work hard and the parents don't care, or the one where the parents care too much and the kids don't care. So I had a good equation in that my parents supported me and my siblings completely. Like they were at almost every game they could ever physically be at. But there was really little pressure, and much less. My wife reminds me of this. Like, did your dad do that, or did your mom do this to you? I'm like, no, they didn't. And so I'm reminded of that regularly. But they were that they didn't what they didn't necessarily launch me into a professional career, but they certainly didn't impede me from wanting to pursue a professional career, if that makes sense. They didn't put so much pressure or be so hard on me that I would rebel and not want to play baseball. They just were there to support. And if I had a good game, they told me great game. And if I had a tougher game, they would be honest, say, well, you know, it was a tougher game. You got to work hard and come back next one. They didn't sugarcoat it or tell me that, you know, I was right and the coach is wrong. And, you know, you're getting the raw end of the deal. I think that's another important part is a parent needs to be honest with their child, you know, not in a way that belittles them and pushes them down further if they're not having it, if it's not going their way, but to sit there and make excuses for the child, I don't think that helps one bit. And so you got to be very careful about that. But so I think that was a key for me becoming a baseball player, a professional baseball player. And secondly, and I shared this recently with a team that I spoke with, other things in my life were bigger than sports. And I do believe this message is really important. There are some athletes that their life is sport, whatever that sport might be. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, or I wouldn't say that's, you know, I would say for me, that would have never worked. I had to have a higher purpose and a higher kind of perspective on my life, including education and faith, than me just classifying. I never once identified myself as a baseball player, but I was other things that enjoyed baseball. Wow. And so that number, I think that kept me going. And above all, it kept me going when things were hard. And when baseball felt like it maybe wasn't in my future anymore, which is a number of times, both at college as a freshman, I pitched terribly at BYU, and there was no reason to believe I would ever play baseball again, having coming off a terrible freshman year and then leaving for 2 years and not playing baseball at all while living in Spain. Like there was no reason for anyone to believe I would come back and be good at this sport of baseball and be good at pitching. And then later on in the minor leagues, I started off tremendously in 2003 in AA. And by early 05, I had a stretch in AAA where I was, I think it was like 4-11 with an ERA around 7.5. And I was sent back to AA and didn't pitch particularly well there the rest of the season either. And so my career in that way felt very much like it could have been over before it even really got off the ground. And so if I identified only as a baseball player and I was dead set on being a major league pitcher and that's the only thing that mattered to me, I would have been devastated. And I probably wouldn't have had the tenacity or the strength to endure a 2-year period of really pitching terribly, because it would have been all that I was. That would have been the only thing that was important to me. I would have measured everything in my life and my worth off of those results. But that was the furthest thing from the truth. I was a husband at that point. I was a father even by my second year. And so these things, along with my faith, gave me a greater perspective. And you combine that with dedication and commitment to the things you love, which I did love baseball. And so I worked very hard at it, and I had a gift to want to work hard at and an internal drive to do that. But hopefully when things were going different than expected, it didn't just completely take my career down. And so those are two things, to answer your question, I think were important. I had supportive parents that didn't push me away from it by putting too much pressure or emphasis on my athletic success, and then having a higher value system and kind of evaluation of who I was as a person were big components that were the foundation for my career.
You know what? That's amazing because, there's not a lot of people that can say all that. And it's simply that, you've had a great upbringing. Your parents did such a great job educating you in certain areas that helped you prepare for your future. But, there's a lot of people out there don't have that. They don't have that opportunity. There had to be, is there advice for when you're going through a stretch? I know, because you can go back to where you started when you were younger, and that kind of helps you. Other people may not have that ability. What's your advice to a young person that's coming in professional baseball and then goes through what you went through for 2 years? Yeah. It's easy to say, hey, I give up, I quit. From the mental aspect, how do I deal with that? And I'm asking you this because I was terrible at it. And I've said it on many shows, okay? I'm the complete opposite. I had great parents, great upbringing, but mentally, I was not very good dealing with failure. And still am not at times. Advice there, because again, not everybody can go back to their childhood.
Well, I think number one, what you said about the athlete that doesn't have a support system, God bless him, because that is way too many young athletes and young people, period, and older people for that matter, in today's society that aren't blessed with a stable parenting or mentor or a caretaker for themselves. And so for those athletes that are in those circumstances, those young people that are in those circumstances, that just puts the onus more on you and people like me that have some stability. Can we be aware of, if we have kids, our friends, the friends of our children, are we aware of, their background and their circumstances at home, and not to get in meddle in other people's lives and circumstances. But if a kid has a little bit tougher setting back at home and maybe lacks some of that support, do we as a parent recognize that and make an effort to be a mentor or someone that can help that friend of our daughter or our son? So just be aware of the many who don't have that kind of stability, because it is a fortunate thing. And if you do have it, be grateful for it and tell your parents thank you and you love them every day, and be aware of friends, if you're young and listening to this, of friends that may not have that, and be that for that person. What would I say about the mental approach? Well, it's really easy to look at the fundamental or the mechanical parts of sport. It's easy to look at the training side when we talk about executing fundamentals and then getting strength by being in the weight room. Certainly the one muscle that we neglect almost completely, or certainly spend less time on, is the mental side of baseball, the mental side of sport for that matter, or life. Is how do you get better at it, Pete? You have to practice. You have to learn about it. Someone has to teach you about how to approach athletics and how to win the mental side of the game. And so you need to have a teacher. And unfortunately, a lot of coaches don't spend time on this when it comes to youth sports, or even getting up into the higher ranks of high school and college sports, or professional for that matter. A lot of coaches aren't well taught or educated in it. And so they don't spend much time on it. And so it just becomes one of these muscles that is neglected our entire lives. We just worry about, how do I get bigger, faster, stronger, and mechanically do the things I'm supposed to be doing. And if I do all those, I'm going to be successful. And when I'm not, if I'm not mentally prepared, or if it's more of a challenge for me, I'm not inherently blessed with greater mental fortitude or strength, then you just collapse. So I think you have to learn. You have to treat it as an aspect of your game. And I do see a lot more discussion on this on social media, or even in books. Some coaches do a fantastic job also. But if I were a coach currently, I would probably spend a portion of my practice training and teaching my team the mental side of the game, because it's going to be a big part of the game. And you can't just mix it into everything you do and say, okay, well, I kind of taught him, I told him to be resilient, I told him to keep it up. You can't just mix it in and hope that it's, but I would spend legitimate time. Hey, team, we're going to spend 20 minutes now doing our mental training and talk about different scenarios. and find good books. There's tremendous reads on this topic. And I don't have any on my mind that I can recommend right now, but if you just go look on the mental side of baseball, mental side of sport, whatever it is, you can find this. And I think a coach has that responsibility, as a teacher, as a coach, as a mentor, to be able to help their athletes. And perhaps that might be one thing, Pete, that if we spent more time recognizing that it's part of the game, and then studying it and then practicing it and reviewing, how did we do? We watch video about pitches. Well, let's watch video or talk about what happened in the game and what did it do to us mentally after that second strikeout? How did we approach the rest of the game? And how can we build off of that and or do better the next time? That's what I'd say about the mental side.
And folks, I'll throw that out because I think that's a great thing. Talk about a book. Ken Reviza, rest in peace, a good friend of ours, been on the show. We travel with him internationally. Google his name, Google Tom Hansen. You'll see a couple of good, actually specifically for baseball. I think that might help you out. But like Jeremy said, check it out. There's a lot of great books out there. Hey, Jeremy, I'm sure you had situations when you were in a certain situation during a game where you were struggling. Did you talk to yourself about anything, or kind of remind yourself of something, or go back into what your parents told you? What was it like on the mound when you did have a tough time?
Well, some games, just like in anything, right? You can talk about the mental side and say, well, I did this and I did that. No matter what you did, you're still going to get tested. And there are still going to be games that, you handle it really well and you fight through it and you came out on top. And there's going to be games where you got dominated both physically and mentally. And so I was okay. I think a lot of it for me was, what was my focus and measurement for success. I had a lot of games early on in my career, and it's really throughout my career, I guess is better said, that maybe they didn't start off very well, maybe a 2 spot in the first inning or 3 or 4 runs. And I'd make it through 5 or 6 innings. And so, there are a couple of things going on there, but I think above all, there are some games where I didn't make it out of the first inning, unfortunately. And so I can think of the games where I did and how frustrated I was and how much it dejected me to think about my stats. Oh my gosh, the team's going to lose. My ERA is going to jump X amount of points. I'm going to take another loss. I lead the league in losses again this year. Like stuff like that can enter your mind.
Oh yeah.
But something that would help me is that, I need to give my team 6 innings. As bad as I am personally, let me not let my bad outing affect our bullpen, which could hurt us tomorrow and the next day and all next week. And so understanding the game more completely was helpful for me in my mental. I would tell myself, okay, listen, get more aggressive, get some quick outs. We're trailing. Maybe the offense will pick you up and run together some big innings. But I'd have to tell myself stuff like that. But there are times where I did, my very last game in the big leagues, I went from being a 10-year veteran to pitching like a first time major leaguer that was in a complete panic. And so I didn't talk myself out of that one. I didn't give myself positive feedback. And when it was all said and done, I didn't even get out of the first inning. So it's a mixed bag. Some people are very vocal. I wasn't a vocal communicator to myself. I was more like take a deep breath, look at the scoreboard and recognize what I could do to make it a better day, a successful day, and then try to go get it and kind of readjust my expectations for the day. If I wanted to go out and throw a shutout, okay, well, I've lost the no-hitter, the shutout, and everything else in between. Let me just do my best to make this a positive outing, and let me win the next inning and the next inning and go from there.
Were there times where you prepared for a game and you felt really good and maybe started bad and vice versa?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I learned, I was watching my son play basketball the other day, and his team in the warm-ups was making every 3-pointer, and that wasn't their strength as a team. They were making every shot, just boom, boom, boom. And I said, have you noticed what they're doing right now? And she's like, yeah, they're making every shot. I said, what do you think is going to happen when they go into the game? And my wife thought it was like a trick question. She's like, they're going to miss every shot. I said, no. I said, they're not going to miss every shot. I said, they're actually going to make them all. And she's like, well, why do you think that? I said, well, I remember one time I was a junior and I could not miss in warm-ups. It was like the greatest feeling of all time. I was Steph Curry as a high school kid. I just kept scooting further and further back. By the end, I was almost shooting half quarters in the warm-ups, and everything was going in. And she's like, well, how'd you play in the game? I said, I went out there, I made my first 6 3-pointers in the first 2 quarters. I was 6 for 6. And so basketball seems to translate, is what I'm trying to say. Baseball,
Sure.
to your point, I would throw sometimes in the bullpen and think like, I don't even want to go in this game. Like, I'm not even going to get an out. I'm going to walk everybody. I remember in college, I was sick against Florida State. They were top 5 in the country. I couldn't even like get out of bed, but I started feeling better around 5 p.m. I didn't even tell my coach. So I show up to the field, haven't eaten all day, feel terrible. What do? I throw 8 scoreless innings against one of the best teams, right? And so baseball is a funny sport that way. And I don't know why it's more baseball than otherwise, but I felt like football, when I was locked in beforehand, it usually translated. But baseball, I couldn't care less what I did. I learned this over time because I had enough games where to your point, I felt great, located every pitch. I walk out there and coach like, how do you feel? I'm like, don't even get anybody warmed up in the bullpen. I got this. And some games it would go that way. And other times I'd be 3 spot in the first, not get out of the second inning, just crazy things like that. So I put less emphasis on the warmups as a pitcher. I was just trying to throw the pitches, get warmed up physically, try to gain some confidence, but whether I had a good or a bad warm-up, I didn't let it affect me. And I think, it was to my benefit a lot of times, maybe even to my detriment though. And other times, maybe I didn't care as much about the warm-up and just, oh well, it'll work out. And it didn't work out that particular day. And so, there are just in baseball, every player is so different, and that's life. Every athlete, every individual is so different. And a coach and a parent, our goal really is to help individuals improve and get better and find joy in what it is they do. And we just can't treat everybody the same. And that's really hard. It's really hard for me. It's one of my biggest weaknesses is I can look back on my life and see what has helped me achieve my success and help me persevere and live a life that I'm, very fulfilled in even thus far. But that's me. And so if I try to dump that on everybody else around me, it just doesn't work. And I get caught doing that all the time with my own children, with my wife and people around me as I try to take what's worked for me and dump it on them. And really the key is be willing to share, be willing to mentor, but get to know the person, get to know the athlete before you just try to tell them how to do things. And if they really want to learn, that's the key. If you can get one that wants to learn and ask questions and then apply the things that you share, that's the sweet spot. But if you're the one always giving advice to someone who never asks for it, probably not a good situation.
Good point. Let's say you were a pitching coach. I know you said, you were very routine oriented and consistent with your work. If you had a pitching staff and you had to work with your pitching staff, preparing them for each game, you mentioned people are individuals. Would you show them your routine and then let them do their thing? Or how what kind of routine would you have before a game for each of your pitchers?
I think I would do my best to implement questions that would allow me to get to know them generally, and then maybe get to know them more specifically. And so, let's say you walk in first day and you're the new pitching coach. Get to know all the pitchers on a personal level. And I can think of the managers and coaches that did that with me. And I played for some great ones. Dave Tremblay, one comes to my mind. Buck Showalter was fantastic at this. Ned Yost was incredible. These and others got to know you on a personal level, number one. And so once you're there, you're already started off on a really good place. Get to know them. And just by getting to know someone, you get to know what makes them tick inherently, even without asking them what makes you tick or, what do you like to do? Just talking to them, you'll start to get a little idea of who they are. So I would start there as a coach if I was a new pitching coach. And then I would talk about the key is I would love to ask as many questions as I can to get them to give me information about what's important to them and gain understanding. Like, hey, tell me for you, are there some keys for you as a pitcher that you feel help you be successful, right? Because what can I do as a pitching coach? I can come in and say, listen, for us to be successful, we're going to do this, 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 and this, and you're all going to do it. And half the team's gonna be like, yeah, I totally agree with that. A third of it's gonna be like, no, that's not for me. And a third gonna be like, nope, I hate that. I'm not doing that at all. And I know those fractions don't work out so well. So don't do the math on my half,
Yeah.
third. But you get the point. You get the point.
Yes.
So I think I would meet individually and I'd say, share with me what you think makes you a successful pitcher or hitter or whatever position he is. And he's going to share some things. And if it doesn't match with what I think will make him be successful based off of what I know, or even what I just firmly believe, then I got to decide, okay, do I bring those things up now or do I save that for a later conversation? And that's going to be a little bit off of feel. So I would find out what do they want to do to become successful. Then I might ask them, what are ways in which you get to that level that you feel like those success kind of indicators are happening for you? What do you like to do to get there? And you're going to find out, do they have a routine? I like to do this on this day, this, and this, and I like to do this drill regularly, this, that, and the other. Or they're going to say, well, I don't know. I just, just hopefully go out there and make it work. And are you open to some things that might help you achieve that more successfully? So now I know what they want, and I can take what they want and see if they're willing to take some input onto how to get there. So I know that they're invested in the outcome. I know that they're invested in kind of the process, but willing to do more of the process to get there. Those are some just things, just going off, off the cuff here on what would I do as a coach. Those are things I would like to try to implement. And heavens knows I've failed in many ways to ever do that in my own life. But as I look here in a perfect world, I think those are things I feel would be hugely successful for a coach and would create a team, even a two-man team, if you will, between a coach and an individual player that would allow them to work together and feel as though they're working together versus just one imposing his will upon the player or the player, doing something that frustrates the coach. It would allow them to have a conversation and work towards a common goal and find ways to do it together. That's what comes to my mind.
Great system. Love it. And one thing I want to reach out, also talk about is, you mentioned recovery. Maybe some of the things that you did after you pitched in the game to kind of recover faster or better.
Well, I've heard a couple of your podcasts. Well, I've listened to as many as I can, actually, a ton of them recently, because you told me about the podcast, and I was genuinely interested because I appreciate you as a coach and as an experienced baseball mind. I love icing, and so I think one of your podcasts was talking about icing.
Yeah, we're talking about icing. Right.
Why do I love icing? Let me tell you why I love icing. Because I feel better the next day when I ice than if I don't. And so if someone can tell me to my face they don't feel better when they ice, then I would say, then don't ice.
Yeah.
Because I'm to the point where I am not going to force you to ice, but I'm also not going to tell you not to ice. Because if I say nobody should ever ice, it's not a good thing. Well, I don't know that, because for me or for someone else down the road, it might actually be a good thing. So I would say it's an option. I like to ice. Here's how I did it, and here's how it made me feel. Try it if you like. I think that's a better approach than telling someone, no, you should never ice, or yes, you should always ice. So I loved it. I would put what would I do? When I was young, my whole life I've hated running. So I run with reluctance. I like stairs more than I like distance. So I'm much more inclined to be running up and down a stadium, or even, a smaller stadium in high school, some bleacher steps. But I didn't like just jogging to jog. I love to ride bicycles. So for me, the running is about getting blood flow and trying to flush out lactic acid. So if I could play basketball for my running, I would do that. And I would prefer that over just getting on the warning track and running.
A lot more fun.
Yeah. So I would do a little bit of that. I never did shoulder exercises until I was in college. And so I think about the kids I see now that are with their bands or with their weighted balls and all the things they do. I don't know how that's going to affect them. I know that I didn't do them, and I was still able to improve velocity and stay healthy. So every body is different. When I did start doing the exercises, I did feel like that helped me recover quicker. When I was drafted as a 23-year-old, the Cleveland Indians, I remember this vividly. They said, we want you to do shoulder exercises that will help you build strength and increase your quickness in recovery. And so I started it because I was drafted by them. I felt I owed it to them to follow what they asked me to do and to give it a try. And I loved it. And so I literally have done the same shoulder exercises and program to a T since 2002. I still do them now as I prepare to pitch against the Savannah Bananas. I do the exact same thing. And it was because it was presented to me and I tried it and I liked it. So those were the things I pretty much did. I would do some form of running, usually the day after. I lifted weights, but that wasn't for recovery. I didn't lift weights thinking that would help my arm feel any better. Maybe it did, but I didn't feel like it did. But I would do my shoulder exercises, and I would always throw too. I played catch every day, just nice and easy. The more my arm was sore, I would just massage the throws out there, feel it off my fingertips, and call it a day. But those were things I did. Nothing, by no means was anything revolutionary that I did. I just was a pretty plain Jane throw, ice, arm exercises, some running, and go to the next start.
Well, I'll tell you what, it worked for you because I don't see many injuries in your career.
It did work. So
you could say you had some great, genes possibly, but man, this is great stuff. Did you long toss? If you did, when did you do that?
Great question. I love long toss, and I did that at a pretty young age, maybe more out of pride than anything. Oh, let's see who can throw it the furthest. So I always tell people I love to throw things. And so, that was good and bad. Sometimes I would throw things out of anger in my room, and my mom and dad would get pretty upset with me for that. But I like to throw things. So baseballs, footballs, if I got something in my hand, rocks, I want to throw them. So I did a lot of long toss. But, just to go back to what I said earlier, my arm got a lot of rest as well. And above all, it got a lot of throwing with a football. And I think the mechanics of throwing a football are some of the best for throwing a baseball. We learned that, a football you throw from this position right here. And now we've learned the last number of years that you want to get your arm to that position. That's what all the hardest throwers do. Some of the healthiest throwers get up into that position. And so I think practicing throwing a football all those years in that position was teaching my arm a healthier way to throw, and was also putting my arm in a stronger position. So I long tossed baseball a ton, but I also just threw a lot of footballs. And I think a football weighs 3-4 times more than a baseball. And so you're forced. I have a good friend that I've been playing catch with, Brian Burris, never played football his whole life. Great pitcher though, pitched a number of years in the big leagues. And I said, I want to start throwing the football as I begin my training right now. He goes, I can't throw a football. I said, well, let's see if we can help you. And in reality, he couldn't. He had this big, long arm action. I said, you're never going to be able to throw that football without pain or accurately with that long arm action. You're going to have to get your arm up here to throw it. And so he's learned how to do that. And he says, I feel like my arm's getting a little bit stronger, but above all, he's had to manage the way he throws it. And so you really can't throw a football with this big, long, crazy arm action. And so I think it's trained my arm to be strong in a good position. So even when I wasn't long tossing a baseball, throwing a football 30, 40 yards, I think was in many ways a healthy version of long toss as well for me.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that, and I don't know, I don't have the answer, in long toss, you've got different people who have studied it and said, they say that you should throw it, as you get longer, you throw it higher. And others say, no, keep it straight, bounce it in. How did you do it? I'm just curious of the technique.
I did it both ways. I would chuck it as far as I could over the moon at times, and try to blister a one hopper in at times as well. So, I think I'm probably in the middle. I don't go super high and do one of those moon balls very often. And I'm not trying to pull it down and doing like a somersault like my teammate Sam Fold would do. When I played with him at Stanford, he'd come gangbusters and catch the ball and throw it home and end up doing a somersault. I'm not that much of a pull down guy either. So I'm probably in the middle.
And how about, pitches? When did you, in your career, when did you start throwing off-speed pitches? I mean, was it equal with your fastball or change-ups? Curveball, especially curveballs. When did you start throwing? Did you have a curveball early on?
Yeah, I think every kid experiments with curveballs when they're young, and I was no different. But for some reason, I recall in my little league, almost as though they outlawed curveballs, and that may be wrong. I can't remember. I remember I threw a lot of submarine pitches, because I felt like I couldn't throw curveballs. And so my junk was a submarine pitch. That was my off-speed or unique pitch. And so when I was 13, 14, I would mess around with the curveball, but I didn't throw it a whole bunch. And I threw hard. And so for me to get people out and to make people scared or look silly, I felt like throwing a hard fastball was my best way to do it. So lucky for me, I threw a lot of fastballs, and I didn't mess around with the changeup even, which I think number one for me, what pitch would I teach first to a young pitcher is the changeup. And that's a hard pitch because it requires good hand size to execute it well. But nonetheless, the philosophy behind it and the idea that you throw it with the same conviction and arm speed as you do your fastball, whether it's a good pitch, whether it spins well, whether your hand is big enough to hold it properly, that's beside the point. Help them at least understand the importance of it. And you can work with little grips to do it. Even my 12-year-old can throw a pretty good changeup with a really small hand. That's number one. The breaking balls for me, I think you want to wait as long as you can. And it's fun to strike people out, and you can make people look really silly with good curveballs early. But I tell young pitchers all the time, great, for all the strikeouts you're going to get when you're 13 and 14 because you have this amazing curveball, if you keep throwing it and you never develop your maximum amount of velocity or the ability to locate the fastball, it's all fun and games until they get old enough that they can hit your curveball and they're no longer scared of it. And now all of a sudden you're stuck with a 78, 81 mile-an-hour fastball. I said, now you're going to get hammered for the most part and you're never going to get a chance. I said, you have to have a good solid foundation of a fastball velocity to pitch at the higher levels in this day and age. And so, if I brought 100 kids in and did a clinic this weekend, could I teach them how to throw a changeup? Yeah, probably. Could I teach them how to throw a curveball and a slider? Of course. Would it be the best pitch for them? Maybe not, but I could teach them how to do it. And they could theoretically execute that pitch. Can I teach them how to throw 95 mile-an-hour fastball in one weekend? And the answer is clearly no. They have to develop that. And so a young pitcher today should do all he or she can to develop their arm to the maximum within reason, giving it rest and having the proper type of balance in your athletic life. But you should maximize your fastball strength and execution when you're young, so that as you get older, someone can come in and complement your fastball with a curveball or a slider. And really what a pitcher should be trying to do is maximize whatever they have. If every kid tries to throw 100 miles an hour, you're going to have 70 of them get injured at 78 miles per hour because their body just can't do it. And so recognize that everybody is not built to throw 100, but you as a pitcher should just try to maximize whatever it is you can, whatever max velocity you can develop over the years when you're young, along with the execution and the location of it. That's what you should do, and that's what you should aim for, and then add the other off-speed pitches along the way as you get older. So for me, 14, 15 is a good age to start investing more time into the curveball. A slider, I'd invest that more in the 17, 18-year-old range.
I'm assuming let's just say you had three good pitches as a starter. Yeah. And all of a sudden you get out there, two of them aren't working, or maybe one's not working at all that well. How do you adjust? What did you go to? I've heard Greg Maddox say, give an example. He said when he struggled, one thing he focused on was going in and out, just changing locations.
Yeah.
Is that something you went to also?
Yeah. I think for me, I was more focused up and down. My big issue was leaving the ball up mid-thigh, belt high. And so even in and out didn't rescue me too much from that. So the days where I didn't have 2-3 pitches and even sometimes 0 pitches, or I felt like I had nothing going, I'd say, okay, listen, the hardest pitch to really elevate and drive out of the ballpark or do damage on is a pitch down in the zone. So I got to make sure I'm down. And sometimes that worked amazingly. Other times I never really got to that point either. But that for me was like, if all else fails, I need to be down in the zone. And that was the way I approached it. I know there's a lot of new age analytics and understanding of the strength and effectiveness of pitching up in the zone. I wasn't in an era that I was able to learn that and apply it very well. So I very well may have been a pitcher that could have been more successful had I purposely elevated, but I guess I'll never really know because I don't have all the data and I never tried to do it in a major league game. I just was kind of focused as the old school pitching people were of pitching down in the zone consistently. And that worked for the most part for me.
Yeah, and it seems like, and nowadays it seems like, obviously because some guys are changing their swings, more home runs, and obviously the pitchers have to adjust all that. It makes some sense. What did you do visually? I'm curious. You got on the mound, you looked at the sign, you looked at the catcher's glove. Was your vision on there the whole time? Did it change somewhere else, or how?
You know what? As I look at video, I think I actually looked down. in my windup, especially when I would, do my side step and rotate my body direction on the rubber, I would often look down at the ground. And I don't think I did it purposely or had any rhyme or reason, but that just seemed to be what I did. And for the most part, I was able to locate and throw strikes. And so I'm not sure I have a perfect answer on that as to which one I would recommend. That's just what I happen to do. And so if someone is struggling to throw strikes or execute doing what they do, then you might suggest a little change. If they're staring at the target the whole time and can't really hit it, then maybe taking their eyes off the target for a minute would help. If they're never looking at the target until the very last second when they throw it and they never throw a strike, then it probably would help to get them to look at the target a little bit more.
Did you just, I mean, I guess if you can go back a little bit, did you just look at the target, or were you looking at a specific area of that target? So if the glove was the target, did you just look at the glove? Do you remember? Or you just did it?
I remember looking at the knees of catchers. That's about the one visual I remember looking at, which seems strange because you're not throwing it to the knee necessarily, but I liked his knee. So if a catcher wanted me to throw a pitch outside to a right-handed hitter, his glove would kind of be between the knees, but I had a tough time locating to the glove side. And so that extra 4 or 5 inches out helped me. And I would often miss and hit the glove because I was trying to hit the knee guard instead. And so it was just about recognizing where are your limitations and challenges and adjusting. That you'll hear that term a lot, adjust your sights. Mm-hmm. I adjusted mine according to my needs. If looking somewhere was producing results, I would stay there. And if it wasn't, then I would have to change that. And so certain games would require a little bit different adjustment.
And talk to your catchers. What did you not like in a catcher?
I didn't like when they called a pitch I didn't want to throw.
Yeah. Well, now you could shake them off in that case, or was that a rule? Yeah.
Anytime you shake someone off, though, it's like a little subtle disagreement, and so
right.
Catchers don't love to be shook off, whatever the word would be. They don't love that feeling, and a pitcher is not necessarily as offended as they are just annoyed when the pitch always has to be shaken off. So communication is really important. You need to communicate with each other before the game so that you at least have a chance to be on the same page. And then, hopefully you just have a good personality in which you fundamentally agree. When you evaluate the pitcher the same to some extent, we're like, yes, that's a strength of yours. Let's use that. Versus sometimes you got a pitcher that thinks his curveball is incredible and the catcher thinks it's the worst pitch ever. You're going to have some problems in that moment. And until you kind of iron out those differences, that may never get resolved. So that's one thing that was tough. If a catcher just didn't listen or didn't want to communicate or didn't see the things the way you did, that would be tough. What I loved, one of my favorite catchers, and I pitched to, a potential Hall of Famer in Salvador Perez and a multi-Gold Glove Award winner and All-Star Matt Wieters. I pitched to a guy named Alberto Castillo, a Dominican catcher, and I pitched with him in Baltimore. And he was one of these guys that was so positive and so energetic behind the plate. I really loved it. I didn't know I loved it until I had it. And he would catch the ball and be fist pumping at the same time, telling me how amazing I was that I hit the spot. And when I didn't hit the spot, he would still find a way to be positive. I loved it. It just gave me so much energy and excitement for my pitching, and it made me think I was better than I was. And so Alberto Castillo was probably my favorite in that moment to throw to, just because it was a party. And then he would just sit down on almost lay down on a fastball. I'm like, what if I spike it and bounce it? Or what if I do something and don't throw it exactly where you think I'm going to throw it? He's like, oh, Poppy, you always throw it where I asked for it. And that was, command and location was not my strength. And so for him to think that and tell me that I was going to do it, I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess maybe I am going to execute it. So I really, really enjoyed throwing to Alberto Castillo, longtime, major league catcher from multiple organizations.
Well, you know what? That just goes to show, folks, how important a relationship between the catcher and pitcher is. Critical, that you're on the same page, that you're working together and all that. Jeremy, this has been awesome, but I'm not going to let you go till I ask you one last question. And this just has to do because I love when they, some players may not like being mic'd on the field. I've watched some players be mic'd, during the game, and they're talking to the announcers and all that. And it's kind of cool for the fan because you kind of get a perspective of what the player is going through there. And then they don't seem to dislike it. They seem to have some fun with it. What I'd like to know, and for our fans, is I'd like to mic the pitching coach or the manager when it comes out to the mound, because we don't have that perspective. Now, some of us do because we've coached and what we actually do when we go to the mound. But what's some of those conversations? I know they're not always all serious, but maybe give us a serious one, maybe a non-serious one. What's that look like when that pitching coach or manager comes out there?
Well, you know, obviously a good portion of these are strategic. They come out and say, hey, we're going to, you know, let's be careful with this guy. We're okay walking him. Or, hey, we need to throw a first pitch breaking ball to this guy. He's going to be swinging. A lot of them are more, and this one, I'll tell you a story about this one. A lot of them are, hey, just giving you a breather, just giving you a break here. And, you know, they're trying to break the rhythm and the monotony or the kind of bad momentum that you've created on the mound. Mm-hmm. And so I'd say that's the large majority of visits is, hey, just give me a quick break here. You know, hey, just, you know, what's going on? Just give me a breather here. And so Leo Mazzoni in my rookie year, 07, I love Leo, probably my, you know, most impactful pitching coach, really helped me begin my major league career. And we had a great relationship. And he comes out one day and he's like, Jeremy, hey, just give me a breather here. And I'd given up all kinds of hits and runs and home runs and everything else. And I was really upset. I was not happy and not unhappy with Leo, but just unhappy with the game and hated the situation. I looked at Leo, I said, Leo, does it look like I'm tired? Does it look like I'm breathing heavy? Is that why you came to give me a breather? Because I said, I'm not. I said, I just need to throw a strike and get somebody out. And he looks at me, he's like, Jeremy, then throw a strike and get somebody out, and he runs off the field. So, you know, he could have taken that wrong and like, what are you disrespecting me for? The, you know, I'm coming out here trying to help. You're going to yell at me. Like, do I look? But that was just my reaction. I was so mad when he said, I'm going to give you a breather. I said, do I look like I need a breather? I'm not running a marathon out here. I just can't get anybody out. So that was one of those circumstances that way. And then another infamous, and I say that infamous, only me and George Kateris know about this, but Leo, not Leo, but I'm in Kansas City in 2013, I must have been. And I'm late in the game against the Angels. We're trailing 2-0 in the 8th inning. And up comes Trout. And in third base, there's a man on third, first and second are open, 1 out. My manager comes out and he says, hey, we're going to walk Trout and we're going to pitch to Pujols and try to get the double play. I said, no, I'm not walking Trout. He says, what? I said, I'm going to throw 3 balls as hard as I can, up and in, try to get him to jam himself, break his bat. And if not, I'll throw the 4th one in his ribs and just walk him. I'll hit him. And so the manager, Ned, you know, bless his heart, he looks at me. He's like, okay, let's do it then. And so he walks off the field and it's me and George on the mound. And George goes, are you serious right now? I said, I'm dead serious. I said, hard up and in all the pitches, and then we'll just dot him at the end if we have to. And so he's like, okay. And so he goes back to home plate. I have this at bat on my phone. I carry it everywhere just in case someone asks me this question. The first pitch is not necessarily up and in, but it's certainly off the plate and it's running hard on him, 94-mile-an-hour two-seamer. Indeed, he jams himself. He hits this little dribbler to third base. Moose comes in. It's a tough play, doesn't handle the ball, ends up like kicking the ball into foul territory. The guy from third scores. Mike Trout is safe at first. And I look at my catcher and he's like, he just shakes his head. And I went, you know, I don't even know if I got Pujols out the next hitter or not, but I went into the dugout and I was like, my bad, Skip. My bad. I should have just walked him. It worked out like I wanted it to in execution, but it didn't turn out the way it was supposed to. And
sure.
I'm sure Skip wasn't feeling super good as that ball got kicked into foul territory on a tough play and the run scored. So there's 2 mound visits for you. Probably the 2 most memorable ones I have.
And if that ball doesn't get kicked, the skipper looks good, and because they don't know what he said, right? And,
well, no one looks good pitching to Mike Trout with a base open, I suppose, but it would have worked out that day had we not done that.
A Pujols ain't something to shake your
head at. Yeah, exactly. We're gonna walk Trout to pitch to the Hall of Famer. None of the options seemed great, but I did feel like I had an approach with Trout that would work. I obviously wasn't going to hit him, but that was my thought is I'm just going to throw hard up and in, because if you can get him to chase that pitch, it's not one that he handles consistently well. And so for me, it's like, instead of walking him intentionally and giving Pujols the disrespect that he might interpret that to be, let me just try to get Trout to chase a pitch that if he actually swings at will either be a swing and a miss or a soft contact. And then at the end of the day, if I walk him on 4 pitches trying to get him to chase, the same thing happened that you wanted anyways. But
yeah, I don't know who that. I don't know who that next guy after Pujols was. Maybe you could just walk them both. They may have done this now. Madden would have walked both of them, you know, and or Buck Showalter's done
I'm
that
sure
before,
it was some
right?
bum like a Torrey Hunter who had like a 400 batting average off me or something like that. I'm sure it was some slouch followed Pujols.
Hey, listen, you've been great, but, you know, I missed something here, and I really apologize. Our good friend Ron Maestri, you know, legendary coach, in Louisiana, he said, now this might be an inside thing here, just between you and him, but he says, how important was Chipotle before you pitched?
Oh, it was that was my pregame meal, and if it wasn't a po' boy down in New Orleans for the Zephyrs, was, you know, early in my career it was a hamburger, and then it became Chipotle, and I'm a huge proponent of Chipotle. I would go chicken or steak, salad or burrito bowl with the vinaigrette dressing and the chips, and I would dip the chips in every single bite, and that was standard for about 8 years in a row, a Chipotle before every start.
You know, and I love Chipotle too. And we're really getting off the subject, folks, because I'm going to throw this at you. Sebastian Maniscalco, great comedian, Italian American. Go ahead and Google Sebastian Maniscalco and Google Chipotle. He's got a great gig on Chipotle and the workers there, and how it's just check it out. You'll know what I'm talking about. Last, I'm going to leave you. I hate to leave Andrew hanging here. And I know you already talked about some of this. Maybe just throw a couple things in here. Andrew Bajo says, how do you convince players? He has a hard time convincing players the mental part of training. And actually, I'll read it. How do you convince players that mental training is important as much as physical training when most of the players, and you mentioned that most of the players want to throw and hit, right?
Yeah.
How do you convince them the mental part is so important?
Here's what I say about that. Go find yourself a bunch of minor league players that never made it to the big leagues and ask them if they thought they were good. They'll say yes. Ask them if they thought they were better than the guy next to them. And they'll say yes. And barring injury, say, why do you think you didn't make it? And they'll give you a bunch of excuses. And you'll say, well, if you were the best and you were good at this and you hit further and you threw harder, then there must have been something that separated you. And I just come to the conclusion, say, you know what? I bet it was the mental side, but that's how do you really do it? I think honestly, you do talk to players, ask them about it, but ask them, just go through the stats and look through the different, you know, players that have or haven't made it, and just recognize that Yogi Berra said it best: 90% of the game is half mental. There's a lot going on in your head, and if they don't recognize it, talk to them about what goes through their mind and what's going on in their head, and they might realize there's a lot more action in there than even they recognize. But it's not easy. It's changing, but it's not easy. But I think if you get a chance to talk to someone that's played the game, I think that may be one of the best ways, is hear a testimonial about just how valuable the mental approach is to the game.
You know what? Great way to end the show, and there's no doubt about it. I mean, I think if you talk to most athletes, that's the separator as you get to the higher levels. Jeremy, awesome. Long time we've had you on. Really appreciate it. Some great, I'm telling you, some great comments, some nuggets here. We're going to have to do some clips and put them on social media because people really got to listen to what you said here. So thank you, my friend. I appreciate joining us, and we've got to have you back for sure.
Pete, always a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you again, and love to be back on the podcast anytime. Take care.
All right, folks, that is Jeremy Guthrie, former Major League pitcher. We had a great time on the show. I want to thank Jeremy. I want to thank our special, not just guests, but also people around the world who listen to the show. We're in over 100 countries. We may have dropped a few because they're not sure exactly where we're at, but check us out on Anchor. We're on anchor.fm, Baseball Outside the Box. I want to thank again SIS Solutions, our IT company out of Japan. Fantastic people. Check them out on our website. ESPN Honolulu, thank you. And don't forget, tomorrow, 5 o'clock Eastern time, guess who? We are going to have another first-round pick pitcher, Asher Wojciechowski. This is a great story, so don't miss it.
Former team.
Didn't even know that. Isn't that something?
Great guy.
Something that the stars are aligning there, Jeremy. Something I didn't even know that. That's fantastic. So we'll be talking about you on that show for sure. So folks, thanks again. Don't forget, stay healthy. You know, God bless you, and we'll see you on the next show.
Thanks, Pete.